I was silenced for that day and for many succeeding ones, but still I did not wholly relinquish my darling scheme. Mary got her drawing materials and steadily set to work. I got mine too, but while she drew I thought of other things. How delightful it would be to be a governess, to go out into the world, to enter upon a new life, to act for myself, to exercise my unused faculties, to try my unknown powers, to earn my own maintenance, and something to comfort and help my father, mother, and sister, besides exonerating them from the provision of my food and clothing, to show Papa what his little Agnes could do, to convince Mamma and Mary that I was not quite the helpless, thoughtless being they supposed. And then, how charming to be entrusted with the care and education of children! Whatever others said, I felt I was fully competent to the task. The clear remembrance of my own thoughts in early childhood would be a surer guide than the instructions of the most mature adviser. I had but to turn from my own pupils to myself at their age, and I should know at once how to win their confidence and affections, how to awaken the contrition of the erring, how to embolden the timid and console the afflicted, how to make virtue practicable, instruction desirable, and religion lovely and comprehensible. Delightful task, to teach the young idea how to shoot, to train the tender plants and watch their buds unfolding day by day. Influenced by so many inducements, I determined still to persevere, though the fear of displeasing my mother, or distressing my father's feelings, prevented me from resuming the subject for several days. At length again I mentioned it to my mother in private, and with some difficulty got her promise to assist me in my endeavours. My father's reluctant consent was next obtained, and then, though Mary still sighed her disapproval, my dear, kind mother began to look out for a situation for me. She wrote to my father's relations, and consulted the newspaper advertisements. Her own relations she had long dropped all communication with. A formal interchange of occasional letters was all she had ever had since her marriage, and she would not at any time have applied to them in a case of this nature. But so long and so entire had been my parents' seclusion from the world, that many weeks elapsed before a suitable situation could be procured. At last, to my great joy, it was decreed that I should take charge of the young family of a certain Mrs. Bloomfield, whom my kind prim Aunt Grey had known in her youth, and asserted to be a very nice woman. Her husband was a retired tradesman, who had realized a very comfortable fortune, but could not be prevailed upon to give a greater salary than £25 to the instructress of his children. I, however, was glad to accept this rather than refuse the situation, which my parents were inclined to think the better plan. But some weeks more were yet to be devoted to preparation. How long, how tedious those weeks appeared to me! Yet they were happy ones in the main, full of bright hopes and ardent expectations. With what peculiar pleasure I assisted at the making of my new clothes, and subsequently the packing of my trunks. But there was a feeling of bitterness mingling with the latter occupation too, and when it was done, when all was ready for my departure on the morrow, and the last night at home approached, a sudden anguish seemed to swell my heart. My dear friends looked so sad and spoke so very kindly that I could scarcely keep my eyes from overflowing, but I still affected to be gay. I had taken my last ramble with Mary on the moors, my last walk in the garden and round the house. I had fed with her our pet pigeons for the last time, the pretty creatures that we had tamed to peck their food from our hands. I had given a farewell stroke to all their silky backs as they crowded in my lap. I had tenderly kissed my own peculiar favourites, the pair of snow-white fantails. I had played my last tune on the old familiar piano, and sung my last song to Papa, not the last, I hoped, but the last for what appeared to me a very long time, and perhaps, when I did these things again, it would be with different feelings. Circumstances might be changed, and this house might never be my settled home again. My dear little friend the kitten would certainly be changed. She was already growing a fine cat, and when I returned, even for a hasty visit at Christmas, would, most likely, have forgotten both her playmate and her merry pranks. I had romped with her for the last time, and when I stroked her soft bright fur while she lay purring herself to sleep in my lap, it was with a feeling of sadness I could not easily disguise. Then, at bedtime, when I retired with Mary to her quiet little chamber, where already my drawers were cleared out and my share of the bookcase was empty, and where, hereafter, she would have to sleep alone, in dreary solitude as she expressed it, my heart sank more than ever. I felt as if I had been selfish and wrong to persist in leaving her, and when I knelt once more beside our little bed, I prayed a blessing on her and on my parents more fervently than ever I had done before. To conceal my emotion, I buried my face in my hands, and they were presently bathed in tears. I perceived, on rising, that she had been crying too, but neither of us spoke, and in silence we betook ourselves to our repose, creeping more closely together from the consciousness that we were to part so soon. But the morning brought a renewal of hope and spirits. I was to depart early, that the conveyance which took me, a gig hired from Mr. Smith, the draper, grocer, and tea-dealer of the village, might return the same day. I rose, washed, dressed, swallowed a hasty breakfast, received the fond embraces of my father, mother, and sister, kissed the cat, to the great scandal of Sally the maid, shook hands with her, mounted the gig, drew my veil over my face, and then, but not till then, burst into a flood of tears. The gig rolled on. I looked back. My dear mother and sister were still standing at the door, looking after me and waving their adieu. I returned their salute, and prayed God to bless them from my heart. We descended the hill, and I could see them no more. "It's a coldish morning for you, Miss Agnes," observed Smith, "and a darksome un too, but we's happen get to yon spot afore there come much rain to signify." "Yes, I hope so," replied I, as calmly as I could. "It comed a good sup last night, too." "Yes, but this cold wind will happen keep it off." "Perhaps it will." Thus ended our colloquy. We crossed the valley, and began to ascend the opposite hill. As we were toiling up, I looked back again. There was the village spire, and the old grey parsonage beyond it, basking in a slanting beam of sunshine. It was but a sickly ray, for the village and surrounding hills were all in sombre shade, and I hailed the wandering beam as a propitious omen to my home. With clasped hands I fervently implored a blessing on its inhabitants, and hastily turned away, for I saw the sunshine was departing, and I carefully avoided another glance, lest I should see it in gloomy shadow, like the rest of the landscape. End of Chapter 1. Recording by Melissa.